Ajam nirvikalpam nirakaramekam niranandamanandam advaita purnam param nirgunam nirvishesham niriham parabrahma rupam ganesham bhajema. Hari Om, Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Friends, Team Param Vedanta extends a warm welcome to one and all for today's 110th session of Bhagavad Gita, verse by verse. Continuing study of Bhagavad Gita, chapter 14, Gunatraya Vibhaga Yoga. Today, verses 23 to 27 shall be explained by our team of Param Vedanta teachers, Dr. Sundar, Dr. Komal, Srimati Indumati Venkat, Dr. Anupama, and Shiv Kumar Yadalam, under the guidance of Dr. Timmappa Hegdesa, who will give us an introduction of the day's topic and also key insights or important aspects of the verses. Master Akash shall chant today's verses. Dr. Divakar shall give us a recap of the previous session. Dr. Divakar, please.
Thank you, sir. Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. The verse 18 should be read along with the verses 14 and 15, as this also deals with gatihi, meaning the travel after the death. Sattvastaha urdhvam gachanti. Sattva guna pradhana people will go to higher lokas, which are 6 of them: Bhuvaha, Suvaha, Mahaha, Janaha, Tapaha, and Satyam. And then Madhye Tishtanti Rajasaha. Rajasic people will neither go up or down. They are only in Bhuloka. Advantage for them is that they haven't gone down. And of course, disadvantage is that they haven't gone up either. Those who remain in the inferior most Tamoguna will go downwards. Tamasaha Adogachanti, which is Adogati only. Swami Paramarthananda clarifies that when we talk about these higher and lower lokas, we should not conceive them within the ambits of the times and space from our world. Like how we cannot measure the dream world using the waker's time and space, as the dream operates in its own time and spatial world. These lokas too have their own time and space. For example, 1 year for us is equivalent to 1 day in Pitraloka. Therefore, annual Pitru Shraddhas offering food to them equates to 1 day when we do it once in a year. The term higher and lower lokas reflect the quality of life, wherein higher lokas, the body, sense organs enjoyed by them is of a higher nature. It is of higher refinement, and their health, wealth, and other aspects are much more superior. Whereas in the lower lokas, there is more pain and the misery. In the next slide, we see the verse 19. Nanyam gunebhyah kartaram yada drushtanu pashyati gunebhyascha param vetti madbhavam sodigachyati. Verses 19 and 20 are the most important verses of the 14th chapter. It is important because Shri Krishna teaches Atma Ahankara Viveka. Ahankara is the body-mind complex with the reflected consciousness, which is also called as Chidabhasa. This Ahankara or ego is my lower I. Ahankara or ego can never escape from these 3 gunas. One could reshuffle from the Sattva Pradhana to Rajo Pradhana to Tamo Pradhana, or the reverse, but cannot avoid the bondages caused by these gunas. We all get attached to an environment which is conducive to our predominant guna. Now the question is how to detach oneself from the gunas, especially when it is said that no one can avoid the bondages caused by these gunas. How does one become Gunatitha? How does one transcend these gunas? To transcend gunas, we need Atma Ahankara Viveka. We know that Ahankara is body-mind complex with the reflected consciousness. All gunas are inherently embedded in Ahankara, and therefore body-mind complex cannot escape these gunas. Ahankara cannot become Gunatitha. To transcend gunas, we need to have the initial knowledge that we are a combination of Atma and Ahankara. And on deeper Shravanam and Mananam, we know that our higher nature is Atma, which is Gunatitha. And we operate in this world through the lower identification, which is Ahankara. So, if someone asks how to become Gunatitha, the question itself is wrong, as I, the witness consciousness Atma, is always Gunatitha, and it won't become Gunatitha at a particular time. On the other hand, Ahankara, the body-mind complex, can never become Gunatitha. So, with Nididhyasanam, when we always identify with Atma, we know we are and will always be beyond Gunas. In the next slide, we see that in this verse, Krishna says, Yada Drushta Anupashyati. When the seer understands that Anupashyati is the keyword, meaning understanding through repeated mananam. Anupashyati kartaram, the doer, na anyam gunebhyaha, to be none other than the gunas. That is karmas, all actions, kartatvam, the doership, and the bhoktatvam, the receivership. All of these belongs to gunas only. In other words, all of these are identified by the body-mind complex, ahankara, as it is embedded with gunas. When the seer knows that the self, cha veti param gunebhyaha, that the self is beyond the gunas, saha adhigacchati madbhavam. Such a seeker will attain me only. Meaning, when the seeker identifies with param, which has no gunas, such an intelligent seeker will attain Krishna Swarupa or Ishvara Swarupa, which is Purnam. One will realize Jivatma Paramatma Avyabhichara. Here the important word again is Vetti, meaning. That means meaning one who knows, one who has discovered the Purnatvam through Atma Jnanam. In the next slide, we see the verse 20. Gunaatita trin dehe deh samudbhavan janma mrityu jara dukkaihi vimukto mritamushnate. Jnana phalam is mentioned here. Atitya, having gone beyond etan trin gunan, these three gunas, deha samudbhavan, which are the cause of the rebirth. Dehi, a person, vimuktaha, janma mrityu jara dukkha, becomes free from the death, old age, and sorrow, and ashnute amrutam, he attains immortality. In the next slide, we see, when I discover the fact that I am the Sakshi, I learn to look at my body-mind objectively. We understand the limitations of our body-mind, that body has to grow and then go. We can accept the aging, diseases, and difficulties and other choiceless situations in our life with a lot of grace. And this attitude is called as Abhibhava. With Atma Jnanam and identifying with Sakshi, the witness consciousness, which is Gunatitha, one becomes Vimuktaha, free from the sufferings of aging or the Prabala Prarabdhas, the unexpected traumas in life. This new perspective to life and one's identity is called as Jivan Mukti. Such a Jivan Mukta realizes one's immortal nature with the claim of Aham Brahma Asmi, as the self is immortal. So, having gone beyond the gunas, which are the cause of rebirth, a person becomes free from the birth, death, old age, and the sorrow, and attains immortality. In other words, he realizes the immortal nature. In the next slide, we see the verse 21, where the interested Arjuna asks a question. Oh Lord, with what characteristics does a person who is beyond these three gunas appear? What is his conduct? How does he or she go beyond these three gunas? These questions are similar to the questions on Sthita Prajna that we saw in the chapter 2. Arjuna's questions has three parts to it. Gunatita Lingam, the characteristics. The second one is Gunatita Achara, the conduct. And the third is the Gunatita Sadhanani, how to attain the status of Gunatitha. What are the disciplines required to attain Gunatitha? In the next verse, next slide, we see the verse 22. Sri Krishna answers the first part, which is Gunatita Lingam. In the verse 22, Sri Krishna says how to know if we have attained the Gunatitha status. What are the indicators or characteristics of a Gunatitha? Jnani has a refined mind, which is Sattvika Pradhana. Jnani develops equanimity for both good and the bad things happening in the world, as well as to the body and the mind. Mano Nigraha and Samatvam comes from Karma Yoga and Upasana Yoga sadhanas. Jnani enjoys the happier sattvika mind as there will be little or no reactions to the external world, but is self-sufficient as he revels within himself. This is called as Atmanyeva Atmanatushtaha that we saw in the second chapter. Even if there is a fluctuations in the mind because of three gunas, Jnani can objectively notice this and mindfully withdraws from any of these violent reactions. Krishna says Jnani enjoys prakasham, meaning sattva guna, which is predominant, and also some pravritti, in other words rajoguna, as well as mohaha, which is tamoguna, which constitutes a very small fraction. Jnani will always be aware about all these three, and mindfully he knows about his own mind, which is not 100% sattvic, and for that matter nobody's mind is 100% sattvic. As soon as the mind reacts with rajo and tamo guna, Jnani brings it back to its original or natural sattva guna. With this quality, Jnani doesn't react as per the changing gunas. He doesn't hate his own mind when the different gunas appear at different times. That is not dvesti, nor he yearns for it, na kankshati, for them when they disappear. This indicates that a Jnani doesn't get attached to sattva guna too. Accepting one's own mind and body and being mindful of the changes according to the situations is the indication of a Gunatithatvam. Hari Om, sir. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Devakar, for a very nice recap of all the verses that we studied in the last class, and you gave us a very nice overview of the Gunatraya and the Gunatitha. Sadashiva Samarambham Shankaracharya Madhyamam Asmadacharya Paryantam Vande Guru Paramparam. Om. We are now in the concluding 5 verses of another amazing chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, which can also be titled as Gunatraya Gunatita Vibhaga Yoga. Let us understand a few basics, which has already been explained by Dr. Devakar today. Our body and mind, predominantly our body, is a product of the 3 gunas. No amount of spiritual practice, no amount of spiritual training can totally reduce the rajo and tamo component. Just as there is no perfect body, there can be no perfect mind. The moment we identify with the body and mind, all these gunas will manifest. So what do? So Krishna says, understand our true nature. Our true nature is a mixture. For transaction purposes, we have a body-mind, which is programmed to some extent by the environment we are in, our vasanas, and to a large extent, our innate nature and our gunas. The only way is through spiritual understanding. We have to transcend. That means disidentify from the body-mind complex, and for transaction purposes, use this body-mind, which is full of all these gunas. So in every activity, whether it is physical or mental, all we need to do is become more and more aware. You are listening, I am speaking. Even as I am speaking, I should be aware that there is this body-mind complex trying to explain what is Gunatraya to Gunatitha, but at the same time to become aware of that Atma Tattva, which is always Gunatitha, which is observing this body-mind complex, which is an admixture of these 3 gunas. Now, my body-mind goes through various ups and downs, but my Atma can never be affected by whatever happens to my body and mind. And all that we need to do is allow the body-mind to go through its interactions. And this dampening effect can understand when I am a little aloof, udasina. I am observing what is happening to my body-mind complex. So how did this chapter begin? This chapter gave us a very nice definition of the three gunas. You know, I don't have the chart with me, but we had one chart which was told us about the lakshana, the indicators, how we are bound, what happens, the gati, that means what happens to predominantly sattva, rajas, tamas after death, and what is the benefit in this life. So knowing all that, now what we need to do is to see how we can transcend all these gunatithas. What is important to understand is we are all students of Brahma Vidya. If I'm predominantly tamoguna, if I'm predominantly rajoguna, Brahma Vidya becomes very difficult. So for a student of Brahma Vidya, we, just like we speak about reducing port, the tamoguna part has to go away. That laziness, that carelessness part of it, that we have to strongly work on that. Then there is that achievement oriented, you know, that restless part of me wanting to do. We have to gradually train ourselves to experience moments and greater amount of moments when I sit silently, do nothing. And I realize that even as I'm doing nothing, I am training myself to become predominantly sattva guna. With this background, let us look into 5 concluding verses of this chapter. We begin with Dr. Sundar, who is back again after a short break. Dr. Sundar, please.
Hari Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Udasina vadasinaha gunairjo na vichalyate guna vartanta ityevam yovatishtati ningate. In this next slide, we see that Lord Krishna started off with the central message of Vedanta, which is Atma Jnanam is Moksha Karanam. The rest of the chapter takes an interesting methodology to reach to this conclusion that Atma Jnanam is Moksha Karanam. What is that method? So Lord Krishna in the verses 3 and 4 uses creation as a prelude to this. Creation is Brahman plus Maya, so it is conscious plus matter. And Maya is endowed with 3 gunas. This we all know. Jiva being a part of the creation, therefore, is having consciousness in the form of Sakshi and a portion belonging to the Maya in the form of Ahankara, which has 3 gunas. Several verses after that in the chapter then made us aware of different aspects of the gunas, because each guna binds the jiva to the samsara. The chapter then comes about this formula which already we know: do, know, and be free. Do here refers to karma yoga, but in the context of this chapter, Lord Krishna teaches us that through the karma yoga, improve the ratio of each of our guna so that we become more sattvic and less rajasic and tamasic. So this process gives us jnana yogyata prapti. Then we go to the next step, which is know, which is Shravana Manana Nididhyasanam, to know our true nature, and then one becomes free. Importantly, the do part is required, just like the pole of the pole vaulter gives him that elevation. But once there is jnana yogyata prapti, one can drop the karma pole and jump to jnana yoga. In this next slide, in this crucial 19th verse, we saw Lord Krishna declaring Gunebhya Kartaram, the gunas alone do all the activities. And then he says, Gunebhya cha param vetti. There is something beyond the matter in me, beyond the gunas in me. Identify that and become Gunatitha. It is important to understand that param here, usually taken as beyond, doesn't mean beyond in the normal sense. It is not like I'm in Bangalore and param is beyond referring to a different place in space as Mysore, or a different in time like tomorrow. we have to understand that param as beyond means that the true nature of God as consciousness is in and through the gunas. The Lord in its true form is intimate with each of the gunas, yet he remains unaffected by any of them. So the true nature of God, which is my true nature as well, is immanent through matter. It is intimate to the gunas, yet remains unaffected, which is transcendent. An example given is the movie screen is intimate with the happenings on the screen, the character, because the hero, the villain, they don't exist if there is no movie screen. Yet the fire on the movie doesn't affect the screen, or the water doesn't wet the screen. So there is a shift in reality between the matter and the consciousness. So in other words, this verse says that as Jnani, Lord Krishna is unaffected to the least by the gunas. Arjuna is wowed by this because he is in a circumstance where he is affected by the surroundings. In the moment of wow, Arjuna asks the Lord to tell what are the characteristics of this person, what is his achara to the world, and how he can become one. So in this next slide, in the previous verse, as we have already seen, discussed what is the lingam of the Gunathitha. We now move on to the present verse, which discusses what is the achara, or what is the attitude of the Jnani towards the world around him. So in this next slide, Pujya Swami Paramarthananda ji describes the achara of the Jnani, the Gunatitha, towards the surrounding world to be one of objective acceptance of the world as being made out of the three gunas. Next slide, sir. So we can see this verse in two lines. There is a subtle hint of Paramarthika Satyam and Vyavaharika Satyam in this verse. Let us see how. In this next slide, at the most basic, this sentence can be seen as Yaha na vichalyate. So it is talking about a person who is not shaken up. By what? Gunaihi na vichalyate. So this person is unaffected by the gunas. He is unaffected by the matter. Why is he not affected? That is explained by the adjective to yaha, which is asinaha. He is seated or stationed. In what manner? Udasinavad asinaha. So he is seated as if indifferent. That what in udasinavat is important, because then udasinavat doesn't mean he is indifferent in the sense that he is negligent to the gunas. What is important is udasinavat means that he is impartial. Impartial means what? He is impartial towards the matter. He does not have any ragadveshas with regards to matter. And this is born out of the understanding of Brahma Satyam Jagan Mithya, born out of the understanding that one's true nature, being that of Brahman, is a karta, and the material portion within him, which is as good as Mithya. Therefore, he is indifferent as a akarta, as Atma. However, he is actually active, 100% doing his responsibilities regards his lower nature, which is body-mind complex. In this next slide, we see how this understanding of Paramarthika Satyam or Brahma Satyam Jagan Mithya translates to wonderful accomplishments in his Vyavaharik plane. So this understanding that he is akarta, yet the body-mind complex has to do its duties, arises from the fact that gunaha guneshu vartante. So as Brahman, he is akarta, but at the body-mind complex, he knows that his lower I, which is made up of gunas, is bound to interact with the world, which is also made up of gunas. But then, since he is abiding in his higher nature, which is Atma or Brahman, which is akarta, yaha avathishtati na ingate. He is firmly abiding in this knowledge and he does not waver. So the first line, Pujya Swami Paramarthanandaji calls it as primary liberation, which is Paramarthika Satyam. Yet we have to go about our lives in the Vyavaharik level. And here I should have a clear understanding that let the gunas interact with the outside world, yet I am unaffected by it. And this understanding is secondary liberation. In this next slide, so the message is our life is one of primary liberation and secondary liberation. Primary liberation is abiding firmly in the Paramarthik Satyam. And secondary liberation is I need not be affected by the gunas. I try to keep my mind as sattvic as I can. But Pujya Swami Paramarthanandaji emphasizes that even for a jnani, it is not possible to have a perfect mind. So one needs to perfect his mind to get jnana yogyata prapti. After that, instead of trying to perfect one's mind, one should then make an attempt to shift and make claim to the Atma. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Sundar. We not only got a very nice explanation of an important verse, we also got the summary of the entire chapter very nicely and very clearly done. So what else can I say? You have already said everything. Very fortunately, thanks to our gurus, we have been shown our true nature. And once we know that what our true nature is, what do we do in transaction? Udasinavat. Be as though indifferent. We are not indifferent, but we are watching in a way that we are not going to be affected. As we have responsibilities, we need to be able to fulfill all those responsibilities. But at the same time, remember that the transactions should not affect us in any way. And all our efforts will be to be more and more sattvic in all our activities. Verse 24 will be explained by Dr. Komal Prasad. Dr. Komal, please.
Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. We saw Arjuna asked 3 questions about Gunatitha. What are the characteristics of a Gunatitha? How does he conduct himself in this world? And how does he become a Gunatitha? So we are seeing that Sri Krishna answers these questions in verses 22 to 26. What are the characteristics of a Gunatitha? Dr. Sundar nicely explained. A Gunatitha knows that these 3 gunas are the inevitable compositions of everything. Everything means everything, including my own mind. And therefore, he is able to accept his own mind. Accepting one's own body and accepting one's own mind, this objectivity regarding one's own body and mind is an indication, is the indication of the Gunatitha or a Gnani. And in verse 24, Sri Krishna answers the second question. How does a Gunatitha conduct himself in this life? Samadukha sukha swastaha, samaloštashma kanchanaha, tulya priya priyo dhiraha, tulya nindatma samstutihi. Dhira, the wise man, abiding in the self, that is swastha, staying, like sitting, like fixed in his own self. Swastha, samadukha sukha, is the same in pleasure and pain. Samaloštashma kanchanaha is the same towards a clod of earth, stone or gold. Everything means same to him. Tulya priya priya, that is, he is same in desirable and undesirable situations. Tulya nindatma samstutihi is the same in censure and praise of himself by others. So Krishna emphasizes one main point here, sarvatra samatvam, as a characteristic of Gunatitha, how he conducts in this world. As we see in the next slide, how does Gunatitha act? Samatvam, same response to pleasure and pain. The stone, gold, or mass of earth is the same for him. Same in desirable and undesirable situations. Censure or praise, mana or apamana, friends and foes. He has given up all the binding activities. It means the same to him. Just as the body-mind complex is made of 3 fluctuating gunas, the entire world is also made up of these 3 gunas. So what we have to do, invariably, inevitably, we'll have to interact with people with predominant sattvic or rajasic or tamasic nature. And much more over that, people will not be the same. They will not be sattvic, rajasic or tamasic all the time. So with such complexity, once you know that people and environment behave according to the fluctuations in the 3 gunas, which interact with similarly fluctuating 3 gunas in yourself, then there is an equanimity. It's like a child's play. There will be an equanimity of mind. Mind is free from violent reactions. And even if there is a bit of reaction, it does not react to those reactions. That is samatvam. Samatvam is his achara. Just as a Sangita Vidwan, when he sings, whatever he sings, when in one corner of his mind, there's always, he is aware of the tambur is Shruti. If he thinks of Shruti always, he can't sing properly. But if he forgets the Shruti altogether, then there will be Apashruti. That is the condition. He has to balance. He should always be noticing the Shruti in the background, but he should also concentrate on what he is singing. So that state is samatvam, swastha, abiding in his own Atma. Samadukka sukha. There is no resistance to favorable or unfavorable situations which are inevitable in life. Health or ill health, corona or floods, birth or death, financially better or in an adverse situation, praise, criticism, pleasant, unpleasant situations. When such situations come, he is sama. It is not indifference to the situation, nor it is any overreaction to the situation. But whatever can be done, whatever needs to be done to improve the situation, it is done. But all the time poised. Samaloshtashma kanchana. Loshta means a clod of earth. Ashma is rock. Kanchana is gold. Gold will come and gold will go. Wealth will come and wealth will go. He will be sama. Where does it happen? Like in our dream, if we own a kg of gold in dream, or if you don't own it, or if you lose it, what difference does it make for a person who is awake? It was just a dream. Similarly, once you know it's all the interactions, the play between the 3 gunas of yours and of the universe, world around you, he is samaloshtashma kanchanaha. So a Gunathitha is firm, not disturbed by fluctuations in the mind. When unpleasant or pleasant situations arise in life, he is not indifferent. He does not overreact. He does what needs to be done with Ishwararpana Buddhi. And by acquiring knowledge through bhakti, he becomes a Gunathitha and attains moksha. Harihi Om. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Komal. Another nice explanation. And as always, you have a nice selection of slides to demonstrate Kanchana, the gold you see, the mud and the stone. When you see Mount Kailash in the morning time, all the 3, right at the bottom, you see a rock and mud, and then in between rock, and then you see the gold. Now, the big question is, we are now looking at the Sthita Prajna portion. It's very easy to talk, but can you imagine a situation where something wonderful happens in your life? You get some real good news. How elated, how excited, how happy we feel. On the other hand, there is some bad news. What happens? How we go into the depths of grief when we hear something. Now, in daily life, not in daily life, it may not happen every day, but in the course of our life, sometimes we see extremes of good things, and we see, or we may have to see, very unpleasant things in front of our own eyes. Remember all the time, Atman eva atmana tushtaha. In all these moments, Swamiji has told us about the FIR. It is very natural to feel very elated. It is natural to feel very depressed. But in these moments, especially in these moments, remember, I am beyond this body-mind complex. And therefore, whatever happens to the body-mind complex cannot really affect me. When people praise me, I know they are praising this body-mind complex, which is really not me. And when people criticize me, I also know that this body-mind complex has so many limitations. So I sort of agree with them. So this is what is called being indifferent, not being affected. Certainly difficult, but all our spiritual sadhanas are to attain to what this particular verse talks about. The next verse will be by Shiv Kumar. Shiv Kumar, please.
Hari Om, Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. In the 25th verse, continuing to answer Arjuna's question of three parts, Linga, Achara, and Sadhanani, the Lord, further advocating and emphasizing Samatvam in this verse, says, Mana apamana yo stulyo mitrari pakshayoho sarvaramba parityagi gunatita sa uchyate. These verses look like they are repetitive, but we know that when communicating any important aspect, repetition is important, a method that is adopted, as does the Lord. Here, mana apamana yo tulyaha, whether in manam or apamanam, that is, whether in appreciation, praise, or in insult, disgrace or criticism, condemnation, at the level of action, that is kaikam, this gnani is equanimous. He is tulya samaha to all such pairs of opposites. Mitrari paksha yoho, he is the same towards friends, foes, and enemies. Sarvaramba parityagi saha gunatitha uchyate. A jivan mukta renounces all binding activities or actions, even such of those which may make me feel that I will be complete or purnaha because of that activity. Activity of a gnani is only out of knowledge of purnatva. Even actions to improve his own body-mind will not be a binding activity. He always remembers that aham purnaha. Gnani perceives the dualities of the world, but he remains unaffected by them. Thus, a gnani becomes nirguna or gunatitha. To understand this, Swamiji gives a simple example. We know that a cricket test match has 5 games. Presume one team has won the first 3 games, which means they have already won the match. But they continue to play well to win the other 2 games. But importantly, without any stress or anxiety, they enjoy just playing the game. For a Jivan Mukta, the whole life is a game. And for him, success or failure has nothing to do with Purnatvam. From verses 23, 24, and 25, having understood the traits of those who are situated beyond the 3 gunas, the Lord in the last 2 verses explains how I can pass beyond these 3 gunas and become a Gunathitha. Hari Om, Shri Gurubhyo Namaha.
Thank you very much, Shiv. As you explained, these verses look like repetition, but as you said, repetition from a different angle is very important. To be able to say how I can be the same with a friend or with an enemy, when I'm praised, when I'm criticized. Also, to have that sense of inaction in action. I have so much of responsibilities and work to do. How I can do it with the least amount of effort, or as Swamiji says, do it as if you don't have to prove anything to anybody, because the ego is always wanting to prove something to somebody. The next verse will be explained by Indumati. Indumati, please.
Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. We have seen in the previous 3 verses how a man of perfection who has gone beyond the tyrannies of the three gunas, wherein neither the thrills of sattva, nor the noisy clamors of rajas, nor the weariness of tamas have any admission at all, and such a person is said to have crossed beyond the gunas. The Lord now proceeds to answer the question, how does one transcend the gunas? In this verse, number 26 of the 14th chapter. The shloka goes like this. Mam chayo vyabhicharena bhakti yogena sevate sagunan samatityaitan brahma bhuyaya kalpate. Word by word, meaning goes like this. Saha yaha sevate, he who worships, mamcha, me alone, avyabhicharena bhakti yogena, through the yoga of unswerving devotion, that is, love for God is called devotion. Kalpate, it becomes fit, Brahma bhuyaya, to attain the nature of Brahman, samatitya, by going beyond etan gunan, these gunas. In the next slide, we see that he who worships me alone through the yoga of unswerving devotion becomes fit to attain the nature of Brahman by going beyond these gunas, meaning he is fit to become Brahman. In the next slide, we see that the question of Gunatitha is answered here. That is, Gunatitatva sadhanam, which means he who is serving me with pure devotion and crossing beyond the three gunas is fit to become Brahman. Then, what is the means of becoming Gunatitha? Gita Acharya, that is Lord Sri Krishna, has already said that Jnanam is the only means of becoming Gunatitha. Arjuna has now understood this, but wants to know how to attain Jnanam, by which one can become Gunatitha. Sri Krishna says, the only means of becoming a Gunatitha is through bhakti. Bhakti yoga is the sadhana. That should be Avyabhichara Bhakti yogena. That is pure, unflinching devotion. In the next slide, we see then what is meant by Avyabhichara Bhakti. Lord Krishna has already talked about Artha Bhakti, Artharthi Bhakti, and Jignasu Bhakti in chapter 7. That Jignasu Bhakti here is called Avyabhichari Bhakti, a bhakti through which we seek the Lord and Lord alone. Saha etan gunan samatitya. Such a person will certainly cross over the three gunas because he will be going through all the levels of sadhanas consisting of karma, upasana, and the final level of bhakti yoga, which is Vedanta Shravana, Manana, and Nididhyasana. This is very important. In the next slide, we see that having gone through these levels, Sa Brahma Bhuyaya Kalpate, he becomes eligible to become one with Brahman. Brahma Bhuyaha means Brahma Bhavana. Brahma Bhavana means Brahma Swarupam. Brahma Swarupam means Nirguna Swarupam, because Brahma is Nirgunam. Nirguna Swarupam means Gunatitha. Thus, such a person will attain Jnanam and becomes Gunatitha. To sum up, he who constantly worships the Lord through the yoga of exclusive devotion, transcending these three gunas, he becomes eligible for attaining Brahma, and it is said that the seeker is fit for becoming Brahman. To realize Brahman is to become Brahman. To realize the waker is to become the waker. Hari Om. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Indumati, for a very nice explanation of an important verse. You will see what is the limitations, how far we can go. We can do all our sadhanas to become eligible for Brahma Vidya. And once we become eligible from Gunatraya, that means we move predominantly from Tamogana, move away from Rajogana, come to Sattva. The jump from Gunatraya to Gunatitha is not something that we do, it is something that happens. And how does it happen? Shri Krishna gives an answer. He says through bhakti. It is only through bhakti. It is through devotion. This is not our effort. So all we can do is prayatna, prayatna, and prayatna. But then it is grace that which takes us across. And what kind of bhakti? Avyabhichara Bhakti. This is not an ordinary type of bhakti that comes and goes. It's an extraordinary type of bhakti. If a person has really loved, you will know what this type of bhakti is. When a student went to Kabir to understand his understanding of life and God, his first question was, have you loved? And the man said, no. He says, if you have never loved, how can I teach you? But then he said very smilingly, but I love my cow. He said, oh, really, come, then I can teach you. If you have really loved, and if you know what love is, love as identification, love as not other than yourself, if God can become that kind of a beloved in your life, something that you think of all the time, then that is what helps us to move from Gunatraya to Gunatitha. We now come to the last verse. This last verse is actually a very cryptic verse. It is not easy to understand without the Bhashyam of Adi Shankara. And Dr. Anupama, please explain this verse to us.
Shri Gurubhyo Namaha, verse 27. Brahmano hi pratishta aham amritasya avyayasya cha shashvatasya cha dharmasya sukhasya aikantikasya cha. Here Krishna says, I am the embodiment of that Gunaatita Brahman which you want to attain. As we have just heard in the previous verse 26, Krishna had said one could attain moksha by worshipping him. Yaha chamam avyabhicharena bhakti yogena sevate saha gunan samatitya brahma bhuyaya kalpate. How is this possible? What is the connection between the worship of Lord Krishna and moksha prapti? Here Krishna says, I am the pratishta of Brahman. Brahmano hi pratishta aham. Pratishta means adhishtanam or support. But we also know Brahman is the support of everything. Brahman is not supported by anything. Is Krishna saying that he's the pratishta of such a Brahman? We know that Lord Krishna is Saguna and Brahman is Nirguna. How can Saguna Krishna support Nirguna Brahman? Is this contradictory? Shankaracharya in his Bhashyam explains the words Pratishta, Aham and Brahman with three different interpretations. In the first interpretation, Pratishta means the final resting place of Brahman in our journey of understanding. The Upanishads introduce Brahman in three stages. First, as third person, meaning Jagat Karanam, the Paroksha Pradhana or Tat Brahman. Second, Brahman is explained as the entire universe, Pratyaksha Prapancha, as in Brahma Eva Idam Jagatcha Sakalam, and in Brahma Arpanam, Brahma Havihi, etc. And finally, as Aparokshataya, Pratyag Atma, the inner self, the Tvam Pada. Sarvam Tat Satyam Sa Atma Tatvamasi Shvetaketu. Therefore, in the first interpretation, Pratishtha means the final resting place of Brahman in our journey of understanding, not as Paroksha, not as Pratyaksha, but as Aparoksha. Here, Aham means Pratyag Atma, the inner self, the Tvam Pada Lakshyartha, meaning the Jivatma, and Brahmana means Paramatmanaha. Therefore, Brahmanaha Pratishtha Aham means Paramatma's culmination of final resting place is in Jivatma. In the second interpretation, Pratishtha is understood as the descending down as an avatara. Brahman wears the blanket of Maya and takes the form of Ishvara to bless Jiva and Jagat. Here, Brahmana means Nirguna Brahma and Aham means Ishvara, the Vyavaharika expression of Paramarthika Brahman. Therefore, Brahmana Pratishtha Aham means Brahman takes the avatar of Ishvara to bless the world. Finally, the third interpretation. Here, Pratishtam means Adhishtanam or support, and Brahmana means Saguna Brahma, Ishvara, the Tritiya Pada of Mandukya, and Aham means Nirguna Brahma, the Chaturtha Pada, the Turyam, the Paramarthika Satyam. Therefore, Brahmana Pratishtha Aham means I, the Nirguna Brahma, am the support of Saguna Ishvara. Therefore, by following Bhakti Yoga, Avyabhicharena Bhakti Yogena, attain Brahma Bhava, Brahma Bhuyaya Kalpate. Because this Gunatitha Brahman is Amritam, eternal, Avyayam, Nirvikaram, Shashvatam, Apakshaya Rahitam, meaning free from degeneration. And these three together mean Kala Atitam. Aikantikasya Sukham means Bimba Ananda, absolute Ananda. And finally, Dharmasya means Jnana Yoga Dharma Prapyasya, or Karma Phalam attained through Dharma. To conclude, Krishna says, I am the Pratishtha of such a Brahman. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Anupama, because this is an explanation based on Adi Shankara's Bhashyam. And Adi Shankara goes into a more detailed explanation whenever there is a seeming contradiction. Now, Shri Krishna has declared that I am the support of Brahman. And as we see, anything, Brahman is not supported by anything. So we have a fundamental logical fallacy. And therefore, we need the brains of an Adi Shankara. And of course, none other than Swami Paramarthananda ji can help us to understand what Adi Shankara is trying to say, that I am the support. Now, listen to this explanation, what Dr. Anupama said again and again until it becomes an understanding. The first interpretation when Shri Krishna says, I am the support of Brahman, means this understanding of Brahma Vidya should be aparokshataya. That means I have to see Brahman as myself. So the final resting place of Brahman is I am Atma Brahma. So when Brahman rests in me in that sense, I become the support of Brahman. And this is one understanding. The second understanding is certainly Shri Krishna can say, I am the support of Brahman when he becomes an avatara. And the third, and again a difficult form of an understanding, is that I, the Nirguna Brahman, am the support of Saguna Ishvara. And this is possible through Bhakti. Finally, this verse says very beautifully. This is the nice conclusion of a beautiful 14th chapter, where Krishna says, I am the basis of immortality. I am the basis of that which undergoes no change. Avyavasya. I am Sashvatasya. I am Dharmasya. I am Sukhasya. I am Aikantikasya. I am that absolute, non-ending, unalloyed Brahman. These are all the attributes of Brahman which we need to claim as I am that. With that, we conclude to a very glorious and beautiful 14th chapter. And I will request Akash to chant these 5 verses for us. Akash, please.
Hari Om, Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Udasina vadasinaha gunairyo na vichalyate gunavartanta ityeva yovatishtati ningate samadukha sukha svastha samaloshtashma kanchanaha tulya priya priyo dhiraha Tulyanindatma samstutihi manapamanayostulyah tulyo mitrari pakshayoho sarvarambha parityagi gunatitasya uchyate mam chayo vyabhicharena bhakti yogena sevate Sagunan samatityaitan Brahma bhuyaya kalpate Brahmano hi pratisthaham Amritasya vyayasya cha Shashvatasya cha dharmasya Sukhasya ekantikasya cha Om Tatsaditi Srimad Bhagavad Gita Su Upanishatsu Brahma Vidyayam Yoga Shastre Shri Krishna Arjuna Samvade Gunatraya Vibhaga Yogo Nama Chaturdashodhyayaha Harihi Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha Harihi Om.
We shall be back with the 111th session of Bhagavad Gita, verse by verse. But before that, remember to join us at 6:45 p.m. local time on Monday, 15th of August, for our 22nd session of Disha, a series for discovery of inner strength and happiness, where for a holistic understanding, we shall have one topic and concept, but explained from 2 texts. First one is study of verses 13 to 21 of Karma Sannyasa Yoga, chapter 5 of Bhagavad Gita, with a focus on Gnana Karma Sannyasa. From the second text, Tattva Bodha, our focus shall be Atma, the 4th blessing principle, Atma Anatma Viveka. Our hearty thanks to all the participants for joining us in today's study. Pranams to our respected Dr. Timmappa Hegdesa. Thanks to all the teachers of Param Vedanta for your excellent presentations with painstakingly prepared slides. Thanks, Master Akash, for your wonderful and flawless chanting of the day's verses. Thank you. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamevavashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Harihi Om. Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Harihi Om.